for a Zoom lecture. Hello, welcome to the February meeting of the Wedgwood International Seminars Fall Winter Zoom Lecture Series. Thank you for joining us today for what I know is a very, very interesting lecture. 1 year ago tomorrow, February 19th, we presented our very first WIS Zoom lecture. Anne was our speaker. Today, we are excited to bring you our 8th Zoom lecture. Robin Emerson, today's speaker, is a well-known expert in the world of English ceramics. He will be sharing years of research about Wedgwood's black and white jasper. I would like to remind you that this lecture will be recorded and will join each of our previous lectures on the WIS YouTube channel. One way to access the recording of today's lecture is by going to YouTube and simply typing in Wedgwood International Seminar. However, another convenient way to find the WIS YouTube channel in order to view all of our lectures is to visit our new website by using the link www.wedgwoodinternationalseminar.org. The seminar will additionally take you to the WIS Facebook page. It has been our great pleasure to present these lectures to the public free of charge. If you are not already a WIS member, why not consider joining, since in addition to the Zoom lectures, other benefits include the annual 4-day in-person seminar in April, the scholarly proceedings, which is edited by Dr. Anne Forschler-Tarish, and the fellowship of ceramic enthusiasts from around the world. You will find a WIS membership application on the website. At the end of today's meeting, I will take a few minutes to tell you about the upcoming seminar. And I hope you'll all stick around because it's really going to be quite exciting, and I'd like to impart some information. A few quick words on how today's meeting will be conducted. Dr. Anne Forschler-Tarish will be the moderator. She will introduce our speaker, Robin Emerson. The lecture will be followed by time for a question and answer period. So during the lecture, please remember to type your questions and comments into the chat box at the bottom of your screen. I will now turn the lecture over to Anne.
Thank you so much, Lorraine. And good afternoon and good evening to everyone. I think Robin Emerson, really for most of us at least, needs no introduction, but just briefly. He was, until his retirement in 2010, curator of the Decorative Arts Department at the National Museums in Liverpool, and he's lectured on Wedgwood and other English ceramics extensively, both in the UK and Europe, and also here in the States. He's also very well published on the subject, and his work has appeared in the Transactions of the English Ceramic Circle, the Journal of the Northern Ceramic Society, Ars Ceramica, Apollo Magazine, as well as the WIS Proceedings. In 2014, he curated the English portion of the exhibition Unrivaled Wedgwood for the All-Russian Museum of Decorative, Applied, and Folk Art in Moscow, and he lectured to the WIS on the subject, and it was fascinating. And lucky for us, he's now preparing a book on Wedgwood ornamental ware. I'm so glad that we were able to reschedule this lecture. Robin, thank you so very much for agreeing. And everyone, please help me welcome Robin and enjoy the lecture. I'll turn it over to you, Robin.
Hello, I'm now unmuted. Good. Can everybody see that all right? Are we ready to go?
Yes.
Good. Well, I want to start by saying a big thank you to the Wedgwood Museum and Archive, now run by Victoria and Albert Museum, and to my former colleagues at National Museums Liverpool for permission to use basically their collections and their archives in what follows. So a big thank you to both institutions. Right, Georgian or Victorian? Wedgwood, Jasper, especially in black and white, and the test of history. Whoops, now, why aren't my slides changing? Oh no, what's happened? My slides aren't going forwards. Help. What haven't I done?
Robin, you also need to put it in projection mode, please.
Right, let's just do that. I can put it in slideshow. I can't see the icon for projection mode. It's not where it was before.
Just go to slideshow at the top in the red.
I've done slideshow. Let's see if that will. Yes.
Perfect.
Good. Fine. We're in business. Okay. When Llewellyn Jewett came to write about Wedgwood Jasper in his Ceramic Art in Great Britain in 1878, he wrote, "The Jasper goods are still, as they have ever been, since the first production of that marvellous body, their principal feature, the great speciality of their works. In this, since the days of Turner, although they have had many imitators, they have never ever been approached, and their goods still maintain their old and high reputation. All the famous works of the olden time, from the Portland vase down through all the chaste and truly beautiful varieties of vases, plaques, medallions, services, etc., are still made in all their beauty." It's a miraculous story of continuity. The continuity which tells you it's still the same real thing and that nothing has changed. It was the story people wanted to believe, perhaps the story they still want to believe, but it was actually miraculous, just make-believe. Because in the 1810s and 20s, Jasper had gone first out of fashion and then out of production. For anyone unfashionable enough still to want something like it, it had been replaced by stoneware with a Jasper dip. But by 1830, what most people wanted was something romantic, like porcelain in Rococo revival style. Britain was leading Europe in this revival. Daniels, who made this, were even selling their version of the Rococo back to Paris. In the 1840s, a collector's market in Old Wedgwood began to develop. The first auction catalogue featuring Old Wedgwood on the front cover dates from 1849. The firm rather hesitantly reintroduced Jasper and rather hesitantly showed some in traditional designs in the Great Exhibition in 1851. The critics approved the display. Jasper was back in business. The next big international exhibition was Paris in 1855. The firm thought it should use Jasper for something more up to date and that Victorian naturalism was just the thing. It was not well received. Apparently the critics preferred the old stuff. So perhaps it was time to make some more of that. The leading collector of Old Wedgwood was this man, Dudley Coutts Marchbanks, spelt Marjoribanks. British folk will recognise Coutts as the name of a bank for posh people. He also owned a brewery and was a director of the East India Company. His London house was Brook House in Park Lane. When his daughter Ishbel was ill with scarlet fever, he had Park Lane covered with straw so that the clatter of the horses and carriages in the street would be deadened and would not disturb her. The family were Scots, and when the new railway network was extended into the Highlands in the 1850s, he decided to build a house for the summer at Giesecke, near Glen Affric, the most remote and picturesque glen he could find beyond Inverness. The family could get there from London in 24 hours using the overnight train. He decided to keep most of his Wedgwood collection there and to display it around the house. So he decided to decorate the house in the style of Robert Adam. That would go with the Wedgwood, and Adam was a good Scottish architect. He chose a new and expensive firm of interior decorators, Wright and Mansfield, and told them to make some new furniture in the Adam style and have it inlaid with Wedgwood jasper tablets. They were not to use the old tablets in his collection, but new ones made for the purpose. Marchbanks gave Wright and Mansfield permission to display some of the newly made furniture on their stand at the exhibition of 1862 in London. We have a description and some engravings. Upon entering the furniture enclosure of the International Exhibition, we find immediately fronting us a splendid cabinet in the style of the English furniture of the 18th century. The cabinet is of great simplicity and beauty and manifests much taste in its construction. It consists of carved wood gilded, with plaques of Wedgwood ware introduced in the panels and frieze. There are central and side tablets and 4 medallions in the frieze. The ends of the cabinet are similarly treated to the side portions, and through the medallions, having grounds of very delicate blue, a beautiful harmony ensues between these and the gold surface of the cabinet. Although the cabinet is entirely gold, yet only a few enrichments are burnished. Thus the effect is subdued while great richness prevails. The candelabra are formed to harmonize with the cabinet, hence they are in carved wood, gilded throughout, and furnished with Wedgwood medallions. This furniture was for the drawing room, so a light and feminine colour scheme was traditional. The piano, which is also in a Victorian photo, turned up in the trade a few years ago and shows what the colouring of the whole room was like. Rather beautiful. For a library, a darker and more masculine look was traditional. In the exhibition was, and I quote, a large dwarf bookcase made of Gean wood, Highland black cherry, in the style of the Adelphi Adams. That's it. In the style of the Adelphi Adams or good Pompeian, slightly inlaid with marquetry and ornamented with a frieze of very fine black Wedgwood medallions of the Roman emperors, having large medallions of Roman subjects in the same material in the panels, a work of great artistic merit. And a matching cabinet turned up in the trade a few years ago, which shows the colour scheme. There was also the chimneypiece designed en suite with the dwarf bookcase already pictured, shown in the exhibition. It is of Gean wood, and columns and details in the relief are ebony, very elaborately and exquisitely carved and partly gilt. In the frieze of the cornice, medallions of Wedgwood ware are introduced, so lots of basalt here. In 1860, the Wedgwood factory reintroduced solid jasper. Until then, they had been using white jasper and dipping it in a coloured slip. In the following year, they supplied Wright and Mansfield with oval tablets and long square tablets of solid jasper. These must have been for Marchbanks's furniture in the drawing room. After the exhibition, the furniture was sent north and installed with the Wedgwood collection at Giesecke. Marchbanks's daughter Ishbel Lady Aberdeen later recalled, I quote, the beautiful collection of Wedgwood vases, Wedgwood panels let into the walls and mantelpiece and furniture, which made the drawing room unique. The black Wedgwood plaques let into the cherrywood bookcases in the library. Unfortunately, these rooms do not survive, a later owner of the estate in the 1930s, took the roof off the house so that it would become a picturesque ruin, as indeed it has. And its main function now is to serve as a backdrop for the biennial meeting of owners of golden retriever dogs, because Marchbanks bred the first of the breed, the first golden retrievers at Giesecke in the mid-19th century. And I couldn't resist showing you them. But we do have a Victorian photo of the drawing room. Among the Wedgwood on display, one can make out, viewed from on end on the right, the Jasper tablet of Diana and Endymion, one of the two largest Jasper tablets known to survive from the 18th century, which I have argued elsewhere was made for the bedroom of Catherine the Great, but never installed there. In 1893, Marchbanks asked the dealer Frederick Rathbone to list his collection of old Jasper. Rathbone's manuscript listing the pieces at Giesecke room by room is in the cellist collection at the Birmingham Museum of Art. Rathbone's connection with Wedgwood went back to about 1860, when he worked for the company for 2 years as a traveller in ornamental ware. This was at an interesting time when the market for old Wedgwood was picking up, and Rathbone's next job was with Agnew's, the art dealers in Manchester. While he was with them in 1864, he sold old Wedgwood, including this piece, to the proprietor of the Manchester Guardian, J.E. Taylor. Rathbone became an independent dealer in 1869, as prices of old Wedgwood continued to rise. In 1875, at the age of 37, he signed an agreement with the Wedgwood Company for the lease of a house and management of a shop at number 71 King's Road, Brighton, some 12 doors east of the Grand Hotel and facing the sea. Wedgwood were to pay him £400 in quarterly instalments, I quote, to exhibit exclusively, unless with Josiah Wedgwood and Sons' consent, their ware, as he has already done. His letterhead was Depot for Wedgwood Art Pottery. A letter from him to the company 2 years later reiterates, I shall not sell any modern ware but yours, nor buy from any dealer or others on credit as regards modern ware. He said he himself would buy old Wedgwood for stock. So he was selling a mixture of old and new Wedgwood. In old age, from his antique dealer's shop in South Kensington in 1915, he wrote, I fear the modern school of dealers are rather easily taken in. The old school about the 70s did know Wedgwood. I will help anyone to sell genuine old Wedgwood if desirable, but I will most emphatically decline to help sell modern for old. In some cases, I have been offered heavy bribes for doing this. Was Rathbone protesting too much? His Brighton shop was so successful that in 1883, he moved to one in South Kensington as the principal dealer in old Wedgwood. In 1896, he wrote to Lawrence Wedgwood, on sale, nothing to be sent. I will make my own selection at Etruria someday. Prefer old stock and out of the way pieces. Nothing need be made for me. Old stock and out of the way pieces. How old, one wonders. What else does Rathbone say about new Jasper being passed off as old? He wrote to William Lever about the Sanderson collection in 1905. I find he has 27 pieces in black and white Jasper. If you add medallions, it would be about 45. The old-time collectors thought they were lucky if they could collect 6 pieces in a lifetime. Rathbone's implication is clear. He does not mean that the Sanderson collection is much better than other collections. He means that most of the black and white Jasper in the Sanderson collection must be modern. This is evidently a good area to look for new jasper being passed off as old, because collectors knew that it was rare and therefore desirable. What, or rather when, does he mean by the old-time collectors? Probably those around 1870, when he had just started his own business as a dealer. This was a time of rising prices for old Wedgwood. Perhaps the summit was the sale of the Sibson collection at Christie's in 1877. At this sale, Marchbanks paid £735 for an apotheosis of Homer vase in black and white jasper. And you can see it on the middle of the mantelpiece on the right in this picture of the the dining room at Gieseken. For the same money, then, you could have bought a Renaissance or Baroque painting, which would now be worth many millions. What is more, this remained the highest price anyone would pay for a piece of old Wedgwood for almost a century, not allowing for inflation over that period. That price was not exceeded until the 1960s, when Mrs. Beeson bought her blue Portland vase. Well, Rathbone knew all about Marchbanks's black and white vase. He had included it in his listing of the pieces at Gieseken. But Marchbanks also had another example in black and white. In this rather grainy photo, you can see the two of them. One of them is on the table, the bottom in front, and the other one is sitting in the middle of the mantelpiece. The story was that the other vase had come from St. Petersburg in 1865. That was probably why Marchbanks wanted the Sibson vase so much, because it made a pair with the one he already had. At this point, we need to change Marchbanks's name, because in 1881 he got what the Brits call a gong. He was made the first Baron Tweedmouth. The Tweed is a river in Scotland, as well as a woolen fabric. From now on, we'll call him Lord Tweedmouth. His collection of old Wedgwood was eventually bought by Lever in 1905 and is now in the Lady Lever Art Gallery. Rathbone wrote to Lever in 1917. A New York firm had what they considered a fine black and white vase, as your two Homerics from the Tweedmouth collection. Sent me a photo for an opinion. I declined to give any without seeing it. They consulted the late Sir Purdon Clarke and Mr. Kenneth Wedgwood, the New York manager, who both certified it was old. Of course, neither of these gentlemen had any experience of old Wedgwood. Now, however, it satisfied a wealthy Chicago collector who bought it and gave it to the art museum there. Now, I'm prepared to make an oath the vase was made in 1876. I know from the photo there are only 3 of these vases known. You have 2, Homer. The other I sold to Mr. Sanderson, Virgil, which Duveen bought from me en bloc and sold somewhere in America. And there's Virgil on the right in the photo from the Sanderson collection. Where had Rathbone been in 1876? He was in his Brighton shop, funded by Wedgwood, selling their wares and well informed about their production. The factory's oven book for the 7th of December 1875 lists 2 large Pegasus vases, black and white jasper, very good. 6 large black and white vases and Griffin pedestals, very good. And on the 30th of May, the following year, 6 vases 298, that's this shape, 16 inches black and white jasper. And on the 27th of June, 2 vases 298 black and white, 2 vases and pedestals large black and white. Soon they were making more black and white jasper for Lord Tweedmouth's daughter Ishbel, the one who had the scarlet fever. When she was 21, in 1878, she married the Earl of Aberdeen and became mistress of Haddow House. Almost the first thing she did was to employ Light and Mansfield to decorate the library in the same style that they had developed with her father. Fortunately, it still survives in the care of the National Trust for Scotland. The furniture they created includes a desk inlaid with black jasper and lamps employing vases of black jasper. All this jasper was brand new, like the 2 jasper chimney pieces which I've published in the English Ceramic Circle. We have seen that the most important collector of old jasper was also commissioning new jasper in the same style. As the prices of old jasper rose, the firm learnt to copy its old work with increasing accuracy. Black jasper was especially difficult, as Frank Wedgwood noted at an early stage in the process in June 1865. He says, all jasper is apt to fly in the oven and when it comes out, and will even do so 2 or 3 months after being fired. Black jasper, black dip on jasper body, is more apt to fly than any of the others, and green is next worst. Black dip cannot be put on stone body because it discolors the body badly, and it's the same with green. I think that what he means is what you can see here, where there's a sort of yellowish band across the middle just above the muses. Another letter from Frank Wedgwood on the 23rd of February the following year, 1866, shows that the firm was making quite a bit of black jasper. He says, as to jasper, it is so exclusively almost blue or black that I do not think the public would buy anything else. The firm was relearning the art of making jasper in the 18th century manner. How much of their new production was passed through the market as old by people like Fred Rathbone? Is it just a coincidence that Tweedmouth was able to buy his second black and white Home of Ours at the Simpson sale just a year after the factory had succeeded in making them once again? It's likely that Rathbone knew more than he chose to tell his customers. The factory did not help its customers to distinguish old from new because, of course, it continued to mark pieces in the same old way with just the same old Wedgwood impressed mark. Where do we find the truth amid all these shifting sands? When in doubt, I go back to the oven books. It's necessary to distinguish the descriptions of black jasper from basalt, which is usually described simply as black. The other possible confusion is with terracotta stoneware in black and white, which was quite a common material for flower and garden pots. The terracotta stoneware can usually be identified by a shape number familiar in that material. For example, in the weeks of the 12th and the 19th of October 1782, the clerk listed shape 254, 18 bow pots, scalloped tops, black and white. These are bow pots of that shape in unglazed terracotta stoneware. Like black jasper, its white body dipped in a black slip. By contrast, black jasper is described as black ground as opposed to blue ground or green ground. Later, it's described as jasper dipped in black. In the summer of 1787, the clerk listed 13 trials on black grounds different sorts, which probably means trials for the Portland vase, although the ground of that is not quite black. This probably led to 1 or 2 other experiments with the ground. For the 6th and 13th of July that year, they fired 1 picture black ground 9.5 inches diameter and undercut. And for the 7th and 14th of December 1787, 2 tablets black ground 17.5 by 7.5 inches sacrificed a piece and undercut. But black jasper cannot be said to have gone into production until 1796. In that year, the entry for the 17th and the 24th of June lists 2 jasper tablets, oval, green and black ground, 9 by 6 inches undercutten, 4 ditto ditto, square ditto, 7 by 4 3/4 inches and ditto. What that actually means is that some of these tablets with undercutting had a green ground and some had a black ground. For the 9th and 16th of September, the clerk listed 294, that's this shape, jasper vases 12 inches dipped in black, 294 ditto flower pots 12 inches ditto, and jasper coffee cans and saucers dipped in black. 294 is the shape number which could be left as a vase or fitted out with a grating as a flower pot. At the end of 1796, a familiar pedestal appears. The entry for the 30th of December and the 6th of January has 2 and 1 jasper pedestals, low square with griffins at each corner, dipped black, etc., 11 inches. The entry for the 10th and 17th of March 1797 lists something to put on them. 262, that's the shape, 4 and 4 vases, 13 inches, dipped black, etc. And then 298, that's our shape again, 1 and 1 ditto vases, 20 inches, ditto, ditto. And 294, we've already seen that shape, ditto vases, 16 inches, dipped black. After that, there's a rash of vases dipped in black in late March and through April. Shapes 295, 297, 340, 279, 289, 288, 358, 378, which is this one, 273, 296, 262, and 290. So quite a rush. And 4 tripod vases, which are not given a shape number. 4 more large vases were recorded for the weeks of the 2nd and 9th of June 1797. Sorry, I haven't got this shape in the black version. Shape 275, 4 jasper vases, 13 inches dipped in black, as well as smaller sizes at 9.5 inches and 7.5 inches. Also 2 vases of shape 266, that's the one with the snake handles, dipped in black. And for the 30th of June, 6 jasper lamps with reading figure sitting dipped black. And for the 14th and 22nd of July, 6 jasper quiver flower pots, black and white. So a great burst of activity here, and then black jasper disappears again for 4 years, not reappearing until 1801. And there's less of it. From this point on, the Oven Book is less informative than the Old Wedgwood Order Book 1801 to 12, and the following references are all from the latter. On the 22nd of August 1801, it records a tea service of deep blue and white jasper bas reliefs in compartments, cameo subjects from a déjeuner set. Acorn, actually spelled acorn, or long knob tops, which was also made in black and white. And this is what in compartments means. Sorry, I'm showing a totally different shape just to concentrate on the compartment. In other words, the compartment is the separation of the design with these feathery brackets. So wherever you get that design, it's described as in compartments. And you can get it on any shape. And that déjeuner set had a set of 12 cups, saucers and coffee cans. So it was actually quite a big set, not what we'd usually call a déjeuner. In the week of the 19th of October, black jasper vases were made in shapes 275, 279 and 289, as candelabra in shape 443, and as tripod lamps in shape 290. Sorry, I haven't got a black one. Supports for these were recorded in the week of the 27th of November. Black and white jasper, 4 round pedestals with trophies in compartments. There you are. 4.5 inches high, 6.5 inches diameter, and 4 ditto with festoons and trophies, this second design. The same entry has one last item in black, cameos for Mr. Vulliamy, black ground. These are a special order made to fit the clock cases, which were Vulliamy's speciality. On January the 2nd, 1802 is the entry white on black jasper, 7 inches by 5 inches, 1 oblong tablet, Ajax guarding the body of Patroclus, part of a castle at one end and a tree at the other. And now the entries thin out. There's nothing else for 1802 except an order from Paris, from the dealer Martin Éloi Lignereux during the short-lived Peace of Amiens, and that's an order for 6 garden pots described as black jasper, white torches and rosettes, which I think must be this shape 393. In 1803, there were entries for vases shaped 458 and 378. We've already seen one of those, and another for shape 276. So all these are black and white jasper. In July, there's an entry for tea and coffeeware in white jasper, green festoons, ivy, black medallions, and, turning the colours round, the same in black and white jasper, white festoons, lilac medallions, like this piece, and then the same with blue medallions. But after August, the entries for black jasper stop. All there is after that is something in April 1810, a whole 7 years further on, where there's some black and white teaware described simply as leafage. Don't know what that looked like, maybe something like this. And that's the end of it. I apologize for all the boring lists, but that really is the best evidence for black and white jasper. The oven books don't usually bother to give details of small medallions and things like that, unless there's something out of the ordinary about them, like the special order for Vulliamy. So I wouldn't want to say anything about when the black and white medallions were made. But for the larger pieces of jasper, we can see that there are 2 bursts of production, a larger burst in 1796 to 7, and then a smaller burst from 1801 to 1803. And based on this, I think we can agree with Rathbone that a collector who could acquire 6 of these pieces in a lifetime would be doing pretty well, and that most of those 27 large pieces in the Sanderson collection probably had been made much more recently, and that probably means after 1860. Because we know that the factory at that time was deliberately trying to imitate its early wares as closely as possible, and that Georgian black jasper really is rare, I suggest we should regard examples as guilty until proven innocent. So, which are the innocent and which are the guilty? Many shapes, such as 298, were made both in the 1790s and again in the 1870s. The factory, after all, had examples available for study in the collection of one of its best customers, a certain Lord Tweedmouth. And this goes for any shape which was in his collection. So these, which Lignereux was ordering from Paris in 1802, shape 393, which is also recorded as being made in black and white jasper in the oven book for December 1875, could be either. Of course, if the factory were copying the 1875 version from the one in Lord Tweedmouth's collection, then Lord Tweedmouth's example, which this is, will be the 1802 original. I think that's what it is. Some shapes in black jasper are documented in the Georgian oven books, but I can't find them in the 1870s oven book. So perhaps they weren't copied and the only examples are Georgian. This seems to be the case with shape 294. That should make this 1796 or 97. The Victorian collector Felix Joseph chose to be shown in his portrait with this, his favourite piece. It's now in Nottingham Castle Museum with the rest of his collection. Its shape is number 444, which puts its introduction at 1800 or perhaps the year before. This means the shape was introduced just before the group of black and white jasper that dates from 1801 to 1803. This is too close for coincidence and suggests to me that Felix Joseph's judgment was correct and that this one is all right. Shape 262 was made in 1796 and 97, but there's a big difference between examples. I can believe the piece on the left, but not the one on the right. It also looks as though the greyish body of the one on the right is stoneware, not jasper. This is the piece we saw the yellow staining on. Again, you can see that just above the muses, that band going across. Its proportions are also wrong, too long and thin. I guess it's one from around 1870. Turning it around the other way, some things are recorded in black jasper in the 1870s oven book, but not so much in the Georgian books. Big tablets are a good example. Two examples 17 inches long before firing were made in 1787, both of a sacrificed piece, but no others larger than 9.5 inches are recorded in the Georgian oven books, except for one we shall see shortly. The Victorian books, however, show them firing a number of black jasper tablets up to 18 and 23 inches long in 1877. So big black jasper tablets are much more likely to be that sort of date rather than around 1800. A good provenance is supposed to count for a lot. The great Regency connoisseur and designer Thomas Hope built and furnished the Deepdene in Surrey and famously bought Wedgwood jasper from the London showroom, including one of the first Portland vases. The sale of items from the Deepdene in 1917 included some other Wedgwood too. Lever bought this enormous jasper vase 18 inches tall, which was almost certainly one of Hope's original purchases. He also bought this pair of vases of shape 381. They are just the sort of thing Hope would have liked, but there is no record of that shape being made in black jasper in the Georgian oven books. Shape 381 was very popular from the Great Exhibition onwards through the later 19th century. And when Lever got the vases home, he displayed them on the pedestals you see them on, which he already had, of shape 506, another shape not recorded as made in black jasper in the Georgian oven books. So I think these are probably all 1860-70. Certainly the vases came from the house which had been Thomas Hope's, but we don't know how long they had been there. I've talked about the two main periods when black jasper was made. There are a couple of earlier entries for it in the oven books which deserve attention. The first entry is for the weeks of the 15th and 22nd of December 1781. Tablet of Muses for the middle part of the Chondi piece, black ground 17 by 6 inches, 2 blocks for ditto 6 by 4 inches, 2 tablets of the Muses for sides over chindi piece 12 by 6 inches. Chondi piece and chindi piece both mean chimney piece. Only the first tablet is described as having a black ground, but it would be strange if the other pieces didn't match it. Blocks is what Wedgwood calls the end pieces for a chimney piece. I don't know anything matching these descriptions that survives. The second entry is for the weeks of the 9th and the... Sorry, what's that doing? Never mind, we won't worry about it. Oh, that was just to show you the Muses for the chimney piece. Sorry, it's a blue version. The second entry is for the weeks of the 9th and 16th of July 1785. 1 tablet, black ground, 15.5 by 11 inches, Marriage of Cupid and Psyche. Eureka. This description matches the surviving tablet set into the chimney piece in the family corridor at Kedleston Hall in Derbyshire, the seat of Lord Scarsdale. The tablet is about an inch smaller in both dimensions than the size listed in the oven book, but this is of course because the clerk measured the tablet before it shrank in the firing. The Kedleston tablet has previously been dated about 1778 because on the 2nd of September that year, Wedgwood wrote to his partner that he was, I quote, to breakfast with Lord Scarsdale, and that to make the most of this tour, I have 2 or 3 very fine tablets with me and an easy introduction to show them at Kedleston, for Mr. Curzon was at Kiel and wished Lord Scarsdale might see some of the tablets. Well, we don't know how Wedgwood's breakfast meeting with Lord Scarsdale went, but a handwritten annotation in the revision of the guidebook, compiled between 1787 and 1790, lists the Wedgwood tablet and has prompted the suggestion that it was installed around that time rather than earlier. This fits well with the 1785 date in the oven book. The extreme rarity of black and white jasper in the early oven books leaves no doubt that the entry refers to this very tablet. Lord Scarsdale, as a major local grandee, received a very special tablet indeed. I should say that this is the first occasion that the identity of the tablet with its entry in the oven book has been made public. So there is some positive news about Georgian black jasper. The wider lesson I draw from what we have seen, however, is that we should be cautious about dating jasper items of the sort that Victorian collectors liked. By the late 1870s, the Wedgwood factory had learned how to reproduce quite accurately their old wares. Rathbone may have known the difference, but others certainly did not. In the Wedgwood Handbook, published in 1875, Eliza Meatyard says, "It should always be remembered in the purchase of specimens with a view to collecting the genuine old wares of Josiah Wedgwood's own time, that the same forms, colours, decorations and name are still issued by the present firm, and in qualities which closely rival their originals of 100 years ago. The exhibitions of 1862 and 1871 sufficiently prove this. Unprincipled dealers, especially those who sell collections by auction in large towns, constantly sell such wares as genuine, which they undoubtedly are in the seller's sense of the word, but not in that of the buyer, for he thinks that genuine means genuine old Josiah's ware, and is accordingly deceived through want of caution or perhaps the necessary knowledge." There was also a tension between 2 kinds of critical judgment: the old dilettante view, which concentrated on aesthetic quality, versus the new scientific insistence on authentic 18th century date. We can see the 2 approaches struggling for supremacy in Meatyard's judgment on this green jasper hanging lamp, the only specimen of the kind known, as she says. She notes that it was illustrated in Marryat's History of Pottery and Porcelain in 1857, but concludes, "Judging from its general appearance and workmanship, its resemblance in colour to certain plaques, its style of decoration to various other lamps and bouquetiers, and more especially by the test of touch, we believe it to be comparatively modern." Despite this, she chose the lamp to illustrate the frontispiece of her book Memorials of Old Wedgwood in 1874. She was happy to give it a place of honour in a book on Old Wedgwood, although she thought it was modern. Actually, she was wrong about the lamp, because it is 18th century. The title page of her next book, The Wedgwood Handbook, the following year, says, "The book is treating of the marks, monograms and other tests of the old period of manufacture. Among the marks which she regards as passing the test is a monogram of T and L. She says, in rare cases, the tool mark is a long L with or without a line drawn halfway up the foot. This was in fact the mark of the contemporary modeler, Thomas Lovett, and indicated that the piece was brand new. Lovett's mark Robert's work is remarkably faithful to the 18th century originals, except that he gives his little boys snub noses, presumably because he's afraid of the ground colour showing through the thinly modelled jasper in noses of normal length. You can see the noses rather well here. The notes made at the factory around 1870, when they were struggling to make jasper again in the old manner, probably give a good insight into Josiah's original problems with jasper in the 18th century. Frank Wedgwood writes, "Plaques are rather apt to go crooked in the oven. Some curl up at the ends and some bulge up in the middle. I don't know why some do it and not others. They are weighted down as soon as made to prevent them from curling. All of them cannot be weighted in the oven. The sagger won't allow it. Then some are discoloured by being weighted down. And then perhaps if they were weighted round the edge, they would bulge up in the middle." James Adams makes holes sometimes in the plaques and cameos before he puts the figures on and then lays the figure over them. Medallions and plaques are dipped twice because one dip would be apt not to make the colour dark enough and perhaps make the piece cloudy. He dips vases and all twice. James Adams, when drying the big plaques, puts a rim of clay all round the edge of the plaque on it, with holes pierced in the pieces forming the rim to admit the air. On this hard rim, he lays a roll of soft clay, and on that a bat of plaster, and on top of that, plaster moulds as weights, and this keeps the plaques from going crooked while drying. Jasper figures seem less liable to crack on jasper plaques than on stone ones. NB, we had a great deal of loss with our plaques for the chimney piece at the Paris exhibition of 1867. And here is an engraving of that. On November the 9th, 1869, he lists large plaques, very thick figures, solid light blue jasper, not quite fired up in body nor figures sent in again. The figures were very good though and free from cracks. And then the following year, on the 11th of January, one ram's head pedestal stopped with jasper and fired third time, easy, came out better. Stop the others that had been fired. Oh, sorry, I've just leapt over a little section. Sorry, the 11th of January entry, 1870, 6 large ram's head pedestals came out, stone and light blue, fired easy first fire and fired up second fire. One head fell off and the others more or less cracked at the neck, rather like that. All of them were cracked more or less in the lion's body and elsewhere. And then a year later, 1st of February 1871, they're improving. One ram's head pedestal stopped with jasper and fired third time easy, came out better. Stop the others that have been fired twice with easy soft stopping and fire again easy. And on the 8th of February, the note says the potting and firing is perfected. Let all ram's head pedestals be done in the same way in future. So we can see that the factory put a great deal of effort into rediscovering how to make its 18th century ware. Given the buoyant state of the antique market, it was certainly worth their while. There's a letter from Rathbone to the factory dated 1877, which shows that he was ordering them to make specific pieces for him. He says, "I should wish if I get up any particular pattern, form or colour, it be not immediately copied and sent to Bond Street. I have lost one of my best customers through that. The matter I speak of was a green Shape 372 with plinth and griffin pedestal. 3 days after I delivered it, a pair were in Agnew's window." What had Rathbone told his customer? Presumably that the vase was very rare, with at least the presumption that that also meant old. I was going to finish this talk by saying that I'm glad that as a curator, I did not have to deal with Fred Rathbone. But then I realized my mistake. Of course, I had to deal with him, although he died over 100 years ago. I had to deal with all the things that Lever bought from him, and I'm still dealing with him. so are all of us who have pieces which he sold and described over a career of 50 years and more as the leading dealer in Old Wedgwood. So, caveat emptor, and may God have mercy on your collections. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Robin. That was fantastic, as always. As always. So I don't see any questions in the chat at the moment. So I will, yeah, here's one, actually. Didn't the back stamps help to distinguish the different eras of Wedgwood production?
I don't believe so. I think they were copying their old work very carefully.
Another question we've got from Iris Moon. I was curious about the two major moments for Black Jasper production during the Georgian period, namely 1796-97 and 1801-1803. Was there a sudden fashion for black and white?
We don't know. I think that's the answer, at least I don't know. I don't know why for 4 years they stopped and then they started again. Maybe the second time they were hoping that it would take, perhaps it hadn't taken very well the first time and they thought to give it another go. But the factory at that time was, you know, in a lot of uncertainty. The Wedgwood sons, you know, couldn't really agree on how it should be managed or what should be done.
Could you please say a little bit more on the difference in touch that Eliza Mediard referred to?
The answer is no, because she got that wrong. So the lamp, which she was convinced by its touch was mid-19th century, I suppose, is a perfectly good, best quality piece of the 1790s. It just goes to show how subjective these things are, and that, you know, people will claim that they can tell the difference but by the feel of one thing over another. Well, I'm afraid you need more evidence than just that in order to persuade me. I'm a skeptic. Sometimes I think I know, but other times I think I don't.
Mm-hmm. Robin, when will your next book be published?
Don't know. I haven't got a publisher for it yet. Anybody want to publish it?
Is there any way to tell age of a piece by the hardware that's used to put the vases together?
Well, I think that's actually a very good guide. I think if the bolts and nut on a vase really look right, and you've seen a lot of them, that can give you some confidence. Though, of course, it would always be possible to use genuine old bolts and nuts from vases that have been broken on replacement or later pieces. So all these things are liable to be used to confuse you.
Did the later Jaspers make use of the original Wedgwood molds?
Yes, certainly, because they had them. Why wouldn't you?
So here's a question with the caveat, it's for mature audiences only, Robin.
That's not me.
Regarding Muses, Cupids, and human figures Wedgwood used over the years, can you expand on the figures being veiled and draped versus, as Monty Python called them, naughty bits or private parts being exposed?
Absolutely.
I was taught years ago, one was pre-Victorian versus post-Victorian.
Yeah. Wedgwood's own correspondence shows that he's changing his views about this around 1790. the letters that he writes to John de Vere, who's modeling for him in Rome, basically tell him not to show the naughty bits, because he says none of the present generation, either male or female, will accept them. And this is a new thing, which really has come up because society is changing, especially in the years following the French Revolution. What would have been previously called the Puritan elements, but we will now call them non-conformist elements, the Methodists and anyone else who you might regard as kind of on the left wing of English religion, was likely to take offense. And as English society changed to reflect more of their views, the upper classes, who were much more prepared to let it all hang out, were increasingly unwilling to do so, and realized that there was a new kind of conformity. And so Wedgwood's reflecting that.
Here's another question for you, Robin. Vases with the plaster fill in the base, which covers the nut and bolt, are those 18th century?
Well, it does suggest somebody's been fiddling with it later, doesn't it? Even if the vase is all right. I think that they didn't use plaster very much in the 18th century for that, because it wasn't very strong. They wanted to get a good, strong finish. So they really concentrate on using metal if they possibly can.
Robin, that's the last question I see in the chat. We're getting lots of comments about how wonderful your lecture was. Oh, here comes from Woody. Woody Johnson, let's see. You are in a better position to judge 18th century from about 1870. Do you have any thoughts on the survival rate of larger 18th century black and white jasper?
Well, there wasn't very much of it in the first place. I mean, the only shapes that seem to have been made in large sizes were the sort of 2 or 3 that I mentioned. So the answer is that they didn't make very many. And of course, we don't know what the survival rates are, because I expect quite a few got broken. And that's one of the things we never hear about, really, how many things did get broken. But I'm sure an awful lot did, because when one gets inventories of country house contents, there's always a lot of broken ceramics. Even if things are still sort of in a maid's room or something like that, there's an awful lot of broken stuff.
Thank you so much, Rob. And this has been a wonderful, wonderful lecture.
Thank you.
Very much appreciated. Thank you for sharing your knowledge with us today.
Most welcome.
I'll turn it back over to Lorraine.
Thank you, Anne. And thank you so very much, Robin, for this enlightening lecture. Now, all of us armed with this amazing information you have provided us with, I think that we're all going to begin looking at our black and white collections in a very different way. And that's always, forewarned is knowledge. But thank you all for coming today. And let me go on to a slightly different topic here. And let me pull up this slide. Whoops, wrong slide. This slide. Can you all see that slide? So let me talk about, just for a minute or two, the very next important event which the WIS will be hosting. And that, of course, will be our annual seminar, which will be held this year in April from the 20th through the 23rd in Annapolis, Maryland. And this is just a quick overview of what you might want to know. So for example, the seminar will be held at the Westin Hotel. We will be visiting the Walters Art Museum to see the fabulous Majolica exhibition, which is called Majolica Mania. There will be lectures, as you can see on the screen here. The Majolica, a lecture called Wedgwood on Display that Anne will be delivering. I'm actually giving 2 lectures. Now that's a reason right there to come so that I can meet some of you in person and see old friends. And as you can see, we have Joe Briggs and Anne and Leslie Grigsby, Sophie, myself, Woody, Peggy, and Gabe Blake Roberts. So this is just a quick overview. I just wanted you to be aware, if you're not already. Remember, you can go to our new wonderful website for additional information about how to register for the seminar, for a full schedule of lectures, and about the hotel. And I understand, I just learned a little while ago that a hard copy of this information, as I understand it, will be in the mail tonight or tomorrow. So many of you, certainly any of you who are members will get that in the mail. And for any of you who are not members, you might want to contact us through the website to find out what you need to know so you can all join us. So that concludes our 8th Zoom lecture in this series. Hopefully we will have additional Zoom lectures later this year. We're in the process of talking about that. And I wish you all a very good rest of the winter and spring. And please stay safe, stay healthy. Hopefully this horrible virus will go away. So thank you all for coming and take care. Bye.